Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Where the Mind Wanders with Spoons and Joe. Say hi, Spoons.
Hey there.
Spoons is enjoying the nice weather today at the park in her car. So different setting today. She's observing all these kids in the playground right now on this nice, beautiful day in Tennessee, and I am cooped up inside. Well, the sun has just went down outside my window here in Germany, but I was not enjoying the nice weather as you are today, Spoons. Um, And Where the Mind Wanders, you can catch us at what time is it? 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on every Monday. And then we upload the episode after the premiere on Telegram. Um, as our normal fashion, we were going to let the mind wander. And as normal, I'm going to dump it on Spoons because my mind's blank. and, but she'll spark something, and then you probably can't shut me up afterwards. So
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I'm just enjoying a change of location. It was such a pretty day. The sun's actually out. It's still cold here, but yeah, I just had to get outside for a little bit and get a little bit of the sunshine. So I'm like, well, I don't want to go back in
yeah.
my dark apartment. So yeah, do it a little different today. It's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've been watching these kids for like a couple of hours. There's this huge grass hill, and they just run up to the top and then they roll down. It's so funny. Uh, such a small thing, and they've been doing that for hours. It's so funny.
Probably hours to come for more.
Probably. Yeah, the park's actually getting pretty busy. I'm kind of surprised on a Sunday that there's this many people out, but it's nice. Mm. Yeah. It's been such weird weather here. Like I'm not used to cold winters. We've had such mild winters the last several years, and we've actually had two snows this this winter,
Hmm.
which is unusual. And it's been like in the teens at night, and I'm ready for this stuff to be gone.
Yeah, you and I both. I'm done with winter. I'm ready for the spring.
Yeah.
Um, this winter it keeps getting warm or warm like mild, above freezing, and then it'll go below freezing again, and then it's this Bavaria is just very cloudy this time of year as it is.
Mhm.
We only got snow a few times this year, and usually just a couple centimeters or whatever. We
Mhm.
got a little snow, what, Wednesday? No, Thursday, because we were supposed to do the recording Wednesday, and I had such a headache that day. And it went from cloudy and like wet and cold to really cold and dry and clear skies. And then I had a headache that day. That's why we canceled our recording. We're recording on a Sunday this time instead of a Wednesday. And I woke up the next Thursday morning and there was a few centimeters of snow on the ground. So I guess it's just this weather. It just keeps changing. Like, it keeps changing. And I'm just ready for it to be over. I'm done with the winter. I'm ready for the warmer months to come.
Yeah. We had like this false warm up a couple of weeks ago. It actually got so warm I had to turn on the air conditioning one night to be able to sleep because it was 74 degrees in my apartment.
Mm.
Yeah, I can't sleep if it's that warm. so, so I had to turn on the air. But yeah. Yeah, hopefully this cold stuff goes on through before I have to move into the RV because
Well,
that's not going to be ideal, but it is what it is.
no, you won't have to suffer through it long, even if not, because we
Yeah,
are entering the warmer months. They're coming, so it's a
true.
good time of year to maybe have been, what's the word, pushed by the universe to do this. So good timing.
Yeah,
Mm.
I'd rather try to move this time of year than in the hot summer. So
Mm.
That's why I'm always like February, March is usually the time of year I move. Isn't that awful? I have a time of year I move because I move so often. It's so funny. I can't help it though. I guess I'm always going to be that way.
Mm,
I don't know. Maybe now maybe now it'll be a little different going to a mobile, uh, to an RV. I'm not locked into a certain time of year. I can just move. So, oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, it's a weather talk.
yeah, the weather is always something you could talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I'm
for a
just,
long time, I think it didn't. I was very introverted, and I didn't know what to talk to people about. And the weather was always a good thing, a good go-to. But after the weather, I was usually like, "What else do I say to these people?" Like,
yeah, I think that's the kind of fun part, I suppose, about being an introvert. And I think you and I were kind of similar at a younger age. We didn't talk a lot.
mm,
So, developing that later in life, I mean, it gets easier, I suppose. There's always stuff to talk about.
yeah,
It's trying to find the commonality, I suppose, with people is kind of interesting. I get to
exactly.
do a lot of that now, with the type of work I'm doing. Sometimes it's just little 5 minute interactions. It's kind of nice. You never know where the conversations are going to go.
Hmm. Yeah, I've been finding that in my life as well. Just finding commonality with people. You don't have to necessarily talk about what interests you or deep conversations. And sometimes it winds up there anyway, and to your own surprise. And people are sometimes receptive too. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, like I was like a mute, um, probably all the way until I joined the army to an extent. Like when I was in
Hmm.
like middle school, high school, or elementary school, even like people thought I was a mute because I didn't talk to anyone. I had like very small circle of friends that, of course, I would talk with, but um, I was basically yeah, they thought I was a mute that I couldn't talk, and the army kind of snapped me out of it because you're surrounded by all these people and you're in a small quarters, and I kind of got over it to an extent.
Hmm.
But even then, it was like when I got out of the army, it was like I was always just trying to find people I could have deep conversations with about things that interested me or the things I was aligning with at the time. And um, but I was still very introverted against the rest of the world, so to say. And it's been like more recently, as I was been letting things go, and I realized that I don't need to talk to people about the things that interest me necessarily, and there's always commonality to talk to people about, and that most people are pretty receptive and friendly, and there's no reason to be introverted or necessarily um, in every situation. Like
Hmm.
and yeah, at this point I don't, the things that I've come to be interested in, I do share like on this podcast and with spoons, and but it's becoming less and less people around me that I really find interest in that. And then I realized at the same time, simultaneously, and I'm not in words, but just kind of aware that it doesn't matter. Like the things I'm kind of interested in now are more for my own personal growth, and if I can share them with people, it's cool. But if I don't, I don't have to. Like, and
Yeah.
I can participate in the world and not be introverted or eccentric and well, like wall myself off uh, to people like I've done in the past. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's actually a more fun way to live, to be honest, because I found it
Yeah.
very tormenting being always stuck to myself, being selective of who I talk to, and in a sense, being kind of arrogant in a way. Um, like, oh, they're too stupid to understand what the things I'm interested in, or oh, they're just normies or whatever. Then I realized that the people that call people that are actually projecting themselves onto other people. Like,
Mhm.
um, technically everything that the people who say, oh, these people are normies, that oh, they're just sheep, they just listen to whatever. I found that the people that are saying that most of the time are actually very sheep-like and just uh um talking about hearsay, things they believe and stuff like that, blindly believe because they heard it from
Yeah.
somewhere else, and they're accusing the people on the other side of being normies and just doing that. But they're, to me, I found that that was just a projection, and I did it for years as well. Like, um, to think that you're kind of better, that you have secret knowledge or super knowledge beyond the rest of the population. And it turns out I didn't have any secret knowledge or super knowledge for the most part. It was just me being arrogant. And for years, I would call people normies or sheeps. Now I realized, wait a minute, I was the normie, or normie, but I was the sheep. I was the one just
Mhm.
accusing all these other people of just going along and just listening and not thinking for themselves. And it turns out a lot of them, some of them don't, but some of them do. and, uh,
Yeah.
and I was actually the one that was creating like this bubble, this perceptual bubble of thinking I knew something, and just blindly listening to random people on the internet or from books or whatever. And I didn't have anything solid to back any of that up, and I was the one that was being the quote unquote sheep, and I was projecting it onto other people, and
Yeah.
that was an
I
interesting
think
discovery.
everybody has, yeah, I think everybody has different things like that that we just kind of follow along on, though,
Mm,
when you really dig down into it. I don't know. I've always had a little bit of trouble with some of those terms, like when people want to say normies or asleep,
yeah,
like the, you know, not waking the people that are asleep or whatever. I've always had a little bit of a problem with some of that because it's almost, or NPCs, there's lots of terms out there that people like to use, and it's just a term to put distance.
yeah,
Like they're
separation.
really not any different. Maybe on like this particular thing, they're a little different, but it's just like, I don't know. I really dislike the one about uh, are you awake? And I'm just like, what does that even mean?
Exactly. You've just read my mind. I was going to say, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean anymore. Awake to what?
you know?
Like,
Yeah, because I'm like,
like,
well, maybe I'm awake to something, but I'm sure I'm asleep on many levels on a lot of other things. I don't know. I mean, you have to, I don't know. And I've never liked putting people in a category like they're not participating actively in life just because they see it differently than me. Like they're asleep. I'm like, that's not cool. Their life's valuable,
yeah.
you know,
And
their
yeah,
way of
I don't even
moving
know
in
what
the world.
normie means anymore. When people say that,
Yeah.
I don't know what they mean by awake anymore. Like, I just kind of parroted those terms for a while. I'm like, awake to what? What makes you a normie? Like, like you have to be eccentric not to be a normie. Like you have to believe some fringe thing, and therefore you're special than from the rest of the population. Like, um, I I truly, and for years I never, this never crossed my mind, and it's like, especially in recent months, it's like I'm like, man, I was being really douchey in the past. Like, um,
Isn't that
uh,
fun when you
yeah,
find those spots where you're like, wow, I was just being a complete jerk or whatever. And it's like, you weren't meaning to be, but it's
yeah,
it's I feel like especially the normie stuff, maybe people like to feel special and different.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
And so if I label somebody else as a normie and I'm not,
Mm.
then that makes me special and different, I suppose.
Well, during the letting go process, at first when you start letting stuff go, you can let the stuff call it surface level go, like the anxiety or whatever. And then you get to the point where you get stuck a lot. And then you realize that what you actually have to let go of whatever feeling or thoughts or beliefs or whatever is what they call it, the payoff or the quote unquote juice, as in what makes you feel alive, the pleasurable, secret pleasurable energy that's attached to anything that your mind is spinning in consciousness. Um, and I realized that I had a payoff of wanting to feel superior to other people, that I knew something they didn't know. And then, like I was saying earlier, it turns out I didn't know as much as I thought I knew anyway. And like it was, but I was getting like something about being the black sheep. I was getting
Yeah.
a little pleasure about being the black sheep, being the rebel, being the one that the
Misunderstood.
eccentric, the one that's different. There's a payoff I was getting, and then you have to ask yourself, why am I getting a payoff from that? And then what's the payoff for getting that payoff? And it's like you start unraveling it. That's what the whole letting go process is you start unraveling what is the source, what is the thing that when I pull the weed, everything will go, because if you don't pull it at its root, like a weed, it
Hmm.
grows back. So it's like constantly like self-reflecting and contemplating upon that, and letting everything as it arises go, and going deeper and deeper until you find what that root is, which is always a secret pleasure you're getting. um, in my case, what I was just talking about, I realized, yeah, I'm getting like a payoff from feeling superior to others, that knowing something they didn't know, um, that I'm the black sheep, and then at the same time being like, "Woe is me! I'm the black sheep. No one listens to
Hmm.
me." It's like, why should
Yeah,
it? And then I realized the things I was coming out of my mouth at the time. Why should have they listened to me? Like, I thought I knew
exactly.
something and I didn't know anything. I was just listening to people online on the internet or from books I read. I had no way to back up what I was saying. Like, um,
Hmm.
you always thought you at the time you did, and then you found that you were like just building on a house on the sand, as they said, not on a rock, on the sand, and it got washed away. And then when you know subconsciously it's gonna be washed away, and then you respond back with anger and resentment. These people are normies and sheeps and NPCs, and I'm the special boy. I'm the special black sheep. Woe is me. I'm the black sheep. Like it's like so weird. Like, but that's what it was. So like,
Yeah. And I
um,
mean, there's all sorts of different levels of that too. Like even the things that and you know are correct, and you tell people and they won't listen. It's like, well, that's their choice. They don't have to hear you, even if you have the right information, you know?
mhm,
Um, and what is that anyway? Like, you didn't come up with this right information. Why are you so attached to whether they listen to it or don't? That you found it, they'll find it.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah. I've been
so
coming to
it's just
find that.
funny.
I've been coming to find that lesson myself, Spoons. Like it's like things work out. It doesn't need you to be in the middle of it to be the one that
Right.
if it's meant to be, it will. And some people are getting that juice, that payoff from certain things, and they get, what they wanted. It kind of goes to like in the scripture, I think I've talked about before, about the whole Sermon on the Mount thing, where he's just saying, okay, if you do this, you're blessed with this. If you do this, you're blessed with that. If you do this, you're blessed with this. Like it's um that God gives you what you want, so to speak. And some people's they're getting exactly what they want about feeling like they're the black sheep, or feeling they're the rebel, or feeling like they're the misunderstood one, or blah blah blah. There's a secret payoff to it that you can
Mm-hmm.
only discover when you start going within. Like, no, you can hear me or somebody write that in a book, but you're not gonna truly appreciate it until you dig it out of yourself. Like, um,
And it never ceases to amaze me, some of the things that come up when you start digging in. It's like, what, where the heck did that even come from? Or why is that so important? It's fascinating. The payoffs,
mm,
the twists and turns. I don't know that that avoidant part of me has really been giving me some nuggets the last couple of weeks. Of just wow, that's where that comes from. Okay, I don't know what to do with it yet. Seeing where I'm causing myself a lot of problems over something that doesn't even make any sense. I suppose that's the fun part of doing the work too.
And sometimes
Finding
it's
the
yeah. Sorry.
no, I was just like
Continue.
finding these interesting little tidbits, and then you're like, wow, well now what? Now what? Yeah,
Yeah, I've found that when you truly let something go, you don't even notice it at first. It's like a month later, a couple months later, you kind of reflect and like, wait a minute, something's gone and I didn't realize. And everything has changed, but I didn't even realize it because I was focused on the next thing that rose. And so I wasn't even paying attention, but something in me changed and the things externally to me seemed to be changing. And
yeah.
um, yeah, they always say like it brings me to think about David Lynch, who I guess recently passed away a month or two ago. That um, reintroduced me to meditation back in what, May or June. Um,
Hmm.
so in a sense, David Lynch played a part into my own process again, or re-upping of it. Um, he would he used to say that like he would be doing his meditation for some months when he first started doing it, and then all of a sudden his wife would ask him, "What's going on?" And he's like, "What do you mean, what's going on?" She goes, "You're different." And I'm like, he's like, "I am." And he goes, "You're not so angry and frustrated all the time." And he's like, "I'm not." That she got paranoid that he was having an affair or something like
Oh
that because his
God.
behavior changed.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but it seems to go like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it does kind of pop up in unexpected ways. Like I had one early on that happened just out of nowhere. Is I had a really big fear of heights. And I don't know why, because I didn't always have like a fear of heights. It developed sometime in my teenage years. Um, and doing some of the work, I don't know, in 2021, I was able to like go and hike something that I had never been able to hike previously because of the heights issue. So it's like, okay, wow. That one resolved on its own. It was just like this random thing that happened one day. I was in a spot where I noticed, well, normally that would have bothered me, and it didn't this time. And so then I started kind of challenging it. And it was like, oh, okay, I'm not scared of heights anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what was attached to it or where it came from or whatever, but it's gone now. At least to the amount of things I've challenged it. I'm sure there could be something, some other kind of challenge to come up that maybe it would bother me. I don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, you never know what it's going to affect.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Sometimes you let something go that you thought it was completely unrelated, and a whole stack of things disappear because they're all
Hmm.
coming from that one root, and you weren't even tackling the next level surface or more surface level stuff. Got rid of the root, and somehow that went away with it. Um,
Hmm.
I also used to be very afraid of heights, and claustrophobic, and I got
Yeah.
over both of those in the army. And how I got rid of it in the army, it was I was exposed to situations that were related to heights and especially claustrophobia. And
Hmm.
it turns out when I reflect that I let that energy go because that's how letting go works is you let the energy up and you let it happen, and eventually it fizzles itself out and it just disappears. And
Hmm.
I think psychology, what do they call it, flooding, in situations where like if you're afraid of spiders, you just be put a bunch of spiders on you or whatever.
Oh
And
gosh.
um but that's literally how I got rid of it in the army when it came to claustrophobia or heights is
Mhm.
I got over it because I was exposed to it so much that that energy just played itself out, and it got let go. And that's why I kind of always explain to people letting go. There's a lot of ways to do it, but the one technique like say that is used in like the Sedona method or taught by Hawkins that I kind of utilize is you just go straight to the I call it cut the foreplay kind of attitude is like instead of having
Mhm.
all these extra steps of how to let something go, you just go right to it and let the energy play out, and then it just disappears. And that's kind of the whole concept of flooding, or how I got over claustrophobia or heights. I didn't realize that was going on at the time, but I was letting that energy play out, and it played itself out, and then I wasn't afraid of heights anymore or claustrophobic anymore. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I still have a little bit of issues with claustrophobia, um, which I haven't tested that one in a while. But I actually got to a point, even like when I was working in the hospital, sometimes I couldn't get on the elevators, kind of deal. Especially like if we were transporting a patient and you have the bed and two people, I'd be like, you go with them and I'm going to run up the stairs or down the stairs, depending on which part of the hospital we were going to. And I'll meet you when the elevator opens. I'll be there, but I'm not getting in here. I
mm,
can't. Can't get in the elevator with all of this stuff.
yeah, I used to panic. Like how you get over in the army is your platoon like you have all your gear and yet they pick you up in a truck like this like the old school truck you would see in like a World War II movie or something like that where all the soldiers riding in the back of it.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what they even call those, but anyway, uh you'd be out there, your platoon would be outside the barracks with all your gear, and then they would pile you all into the back of this truck, so like 40
Mm-hmm.
guys into the back of this truck with all their gear sitting on top of each other. Um, and you'd be riding in that back of that truck for maybe like an hour or two sometimes to go to whatever range or whatever training range or whatever you were going to for that day. And so you'd be riding in the back of the truck, crammed together with all your gear, probably like 30 pounds, 40 pounds of gear in your rifle, and then people sitting on top of you and like and then you're riding in the back of that truck for an hour or two and then on the way back as well, so like it's like I remember being back there the first time like oh my god like um this guy is sitting on my leg. I have nowhere to move, like literally like you might as well be buried alive, and just this
Mm-hmm.
massive soldier recruits like in the back of this truck and hitting all
Yeah.
the bumps on the way ding, 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 on these dirt roads in Fort Benning, Georgia. And yeah, just at first it's horrible, and then the next time it's not as bad, and the next time it's not as bad, and by after like a month of doing that, you're like it doesn't bother you anymore. Other than when it's time to get out of the truck and the drill sergeants are yelling at you to get out of the back of the truck, is like your legs are asleep because the guy was sitting on your legs like the whole way, and then they're telling you to jump out of this truck with your legs asleep, so you hit the ground and you're like, doo, doo, you don't have any blood in your legs, like get up, get up, get up, like. Um, but yeah, I got
Yeah.
over claustrophobia by letting that energy play out because I had no choice. It's like, what are you going to do? You're stuck in the back of this truck. You can scream your heart out if you want. Like, there's nothing that's going to happen or change it. Like, you have to let it
Yeah.
play out. Like, and it was good because when I got to a mechanized infantry unit, like a cavalry unit in my case, and the first thing they want the new privates to do is drive the striker, which is kind of like they call it the hole, like where you drive. It's like you're sitting there with your gear, and literally the walls are like you have nowhere to move. You just have your arms here
Mm-hmm.
to steer the steering wheel, to steer the steering wheel. And if you're claustrophobic in that and the striker hole, yours one you wouldn't have made it through basic training if you kept
Yeah.
your claustrophobia in the first place. But yeah, I spent my first I don't know 4 or 5 months in Afghanistan driving the striker like on all our missions and for like 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours at a time. Like it's just in this little hole peeing in bottles, like, um, uh, but yeah, fun times reminiscing about military. But
Yeah, exposure therapy, it does work. I think especially works well with fears, like when you have stuck stuff with fear. I think exposure therapy is probably one of the better ways to do it. I mean, I'm sure you could use the letting go process, like you said, the A to B shortcut, but I think it's harder with fear.
mm,
Or maybe I'm just telling myself that. I don't know.
anxieties when I started proactively doing this again back in what, May or June, I don't even remember at this point, is
Hmm.
anxieties were the first things that I was dealing with. Like I've had friends that were saying that you shake a lot, like when you talk. I had a friend tell me that. Um, and I didn't really realize, but I had like all this anxieties. That was the first things that was coming up. Like and I at the time I was even explaining to you at the time, like it felt like I had shapes like in my stomach, like a tight sphere of
Hmm.
anxiety. And at some point later on, like I was also having stomach problems around the same time, like
Yes.
feeling queasy and stuff like that,
Hmm.
for no reason apparently. And then I started letting these waves of anxiety that initially, I don't know, probably took weeks or not months to finally leave. And because I was holding all this different anxiety for all this different reason. And it was starting, in my opinion, because I saw like a picture. I think I even shared it with you. Does this look like a like an ulcer? Like, because I was telling you about the sphere, and I'm looking at a picture of somebody has an ulcer in their stomach.
Hmm.
I'm like, I think I was giving myself an ulcer, and that was the shapes I was feeling. Like that I was
Exactly.
compressing all this anxiety energy, and it was burning a hole in my stomach. Like, um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I think a lot of people with severe anxiety issues, it does show up a lot in the gastric, especially the stomach. You see a lot of people have to take medication for that kind of that kind of stuff. Ulcers are very common with people with high anxiety.
yeah.
So,
The thing is, I don't even have really a reason to be anxiety other than the things I was holding to be true in my perception, or tapping
hmm.
into an energy field. I learned later on as my unfoldment went, is that I was holding all of these energy fields um, that were bringing anxiety as a manifestation internally and playing out externally as well, but internally. And it was these things I was holding as true that were not true, that were in the energy fields that you would say fear, like the scale of consciousness Hawkins thing. You would say like the 100 range, around 100, give it maybe a little above, maybe a little below is the energy of fear and anxiety and that kind of deal.
Hmm.
And I was holding all these things in consciousness, belief systems, and things I thought about the world and stuff like that, that were manifesting anxiety within me. And as I let that anxiety go, and eventually the payoff that I realized I was getting from holding these things, and I let those things go, is the all that anxiety left for the most
Hmm.
part. Not to say I can't get fearful over something or anxious over something still, but nowhere near as I was like 6 months plus ago. Like not
Yeah.
even close. And it took like, yeah, like a month or two to let go of all that anxiety that was built up
Hmm.
inside of me. Like,
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, I let go of something last October. I don't remember exactly even what it was. It was kind of a tangle of stuff, I suppose. But when I let that go, I immediately had this relief from an underlying anxiety I didn't even recognize was there. Uh, and I don't know if you go back to like the Myers-Briggs stuff, the INFP that we always have difficulty like asking questions, like if you go into a store, people will just ask for help or whatever, or ask where something is. And there was a big portion of my life I'd rather die than ask a question. And I can't explain to you why that was, but it was this underlying anxiety
Mhm.
related to that. And then when I was able to release that, I found I was able to start asking questions, but I was very awkward about it because I'm like, how do people just ask? So I'd be having like these really circular conversations and eventually get to the question that I was driving people crazy. It's like, I don't know how to just ask a question. And that's funny in a sense. But there was another thing, like we use Telegram and I do a lot of voice recordings. And after I let go of that, Sharon said there was a obvious change in my voice. She could, like, there was always this underlying hesitation or something. And she's like, I don't hear it anymore. So yeah, when your voice does change as well, when you let go of certain things, it's interesting. I feel like the more work I do, the lower my voice sounds. I feel like my voice keeps getting like a lower tone or a deeper tone, something.
Mhm.
It's interesting. All of the different changes that happen with that. But yeah. Mm, I don't know. I wish whatever this stuff I've been working on the last few months, I feel like I'm using a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms like food and all of this stuff to sort of work through because they're like longer things and I don't know exactly. I guess I don't even know where I'm at in the process on some of those things. Mm, so I'm hoping they kind of let go sooner rather than later. I've gained about 10 pounds in the last month, and I don't need to be gaining weight. Be going the opposite direction with that. I suppose that stuff will happen when it needs to happen. Hopefully, the weather when it gets a little bit nicer, and I'm hoping to kind of park in some places with some good trails and get back into hiking. I think that will help me quite a lot because what excuse do you have when it's right there at your back door?
Yeah,
So I'm hoping that stuff starts to shift a little bit. Yeah, you just never know where this stuff is going to take you.
that's true. 'Cause you don't know what you've been pushing down, and then you're using other things to push it down, like to distract yourself with, and then it's like
Mhm.
you never know what's coming up next, or and it's not always, it's rarely ever comfortable at first, but when it goes, you feel a lot. Not only do you feel better um, physically, and you feel better psychologically, but you feel more connected spiritually. For all
Mhm.
I can say is you get closer to your real self, which is happiness and joy and love and on and on and on. You literally are that. That is your source, and we have all these
Yeah.
things that we kind of give ourselves permission to feel like that. Like we have to complete X, Y, and Z, and then we give ourselves permission to feel happy or peaceful. But technically, that was the source all along, and that's one thing you discover is subjective, but it's like you experience it experientially, and to where you know without a doubt that your source is happiness and uh, peace and on and on and on. Is that when you let stuff go, that radiates forth and you begin to see that it was these things, that this elaborate maze or matrix or structure that I have to complete a certain thing to feel that, but technically that you're always that is the very source of your existence, and you start seeing that things like all the sages talked about is you are that like that is your true self. This is all a manifested dream, and you're using these dreams to give yourself permission to experience that, but that is your source anyway. And as you let things go, and there's not so many clouds to block the sunshine, to use the metaphor, the sun, like you can't make the sun shine, it's always shining. You remove the clouds and then it shines forth, and that
Mm-hmm.
becomes yes, subjective, but subjective is the only quote unquote objective. Like it's you begin to see um that it's experiential, and you can't really you can impart that through words, but then you direct people, you got to experience it yourself, like because the higher the truths, the more of the realm of strictly subjective they are, and it becomes only experiential. And then you could do your best through concepts to communicate with it, but then you're dealing with somebody else's perception or where they're at the time, how they are holding something at the time. So it's like you speak into their ear, and then it everything that's them twist it into certain something else, and they understand something different than what you tried to impart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's why I always I will keep pounding that spirituality. You could tell the difference between metaphysical and spirituality, because spirituality is always directed on back to you, like
Mm-hmm.
because it's your spirit. Spirituality, it's your spirit we are trying to work with here. Um, all the quote unquote woo woo is more along the line of the metaphysical, like things you learn about, like oh this thing about the universe or consciousness, what about that, that's just more mechanical of what in the sense of consciousness. But
Yeah.
the very source is your spirit, yourself, like um your connection with God or the creator or what have you, the deeper you get to it. um and there's things like I discovered by doing the work, as well as experimentation. In this case, of we were talking about like the consciousness calibration thing that was put
Mm-hmm.
forth by David R. Hawkins based on kinesiology. Um, a lot of the things like I talked about in this episode about holding certain things that are bringing anxiety, like there was no left brain kind of way to explain it until I started learning about the scale of consciousness, and how you can test these energy fields, because consciousness is made up of various different energies, like a matrix of different energies. Um, and at its, I don't know, should we talk about that today? I don't know how long that's going to go on. Basically, it's a scale from 1 to 1,000. It's arbitrary. Like
Mm-hmm.
uh, anybody, you can make your own scale. It doesn't matter. Through experimentation, they found that if you start at one and go to 1,000 of the different energies that can be experienced in the human realm, um, below zero has no existence. It's basically death. And 1,000, you get to 1,000, that's the highest that the human can experience, though it goes on infinitely in both directions. That it's just like an arbitrary scale, 1 to 1,000. Um, and it's a logarithmic scale and energy as well. So every point that goes up, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, so on, is a logarithmic jump. That's how
Mm-hmm.
they found that you can, if you're going to use whole numbers to measure it, 1 to 1,000 is seems to be at the moment one of the best systems, a logarithmic scale from 1 to 1,000. And they found on that logarithmic scale that anything under 200 was false, or energy fields of the ego. They call it force. It's a polarized energy. It only exists within the human perception. So information that's in those energies only exists in the human perception.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they found that using kinesiology, which you can simply say yes or no, you go strong or you go weak, that anything above on the 1 to 1,000 logarithmic scale, anything above 200 would, the subject would stay strong, and anything below they would go weak. And um, Hawkins mapped out using this logarithmic scale different energy levels. For instance, like at energy level 100, since we're using fear and anxiety before, that is the basic baseline of fear that's experienced in consciousness is 100. And it manifests emotionally as fear. But technically, the energy field is nonlinear and it's just pure consciousness. But it's got a very low energy compared to say even 100 101, which you have a logarithmic jump. So 100 would manifest emotionally as fear, and so it's labeled as the energy of fear. However, in when it comes to information like the intellect in that energy spins all this falsehood that anchors you to that nonlinear energy field of consciousness that manifest emotionally as fear or anxiety or whatever, though it's usually suppressed until you
Mm-hmm.
start dealing with it. And but technically anything that from a perception, an intellectual perception that like a belief system or something like that you would come up with um, in an energy field of 100 would be false. Like it has no existence. Is basically how it's explained is okay in the presence of creation, the self, spirit, whatever you call it, is 200 and above, and the energies below 200 are simply perceptual. They're of the ego. Like they don't have an existence when it comes to information wise below 200. So anything that you would test with a kinesiological response, like say you made a statement like the earth is flat or whatever, wouldn't be 100. I don't remember what it is. It's like 130 or something like that, which would be manifesting emotionally as desire. But it you like I get tongue tied with the subject because there's a lot of information to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but basically, you start seeing like using a number system is that like if you start calibrating like 10 or you get like 10 or 20 things that calibrate all at 130 or whatever, you start seeing a clear pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Even though, yet emotionally it represents desire or whatever, it does different things with the mind, how one fantasizes, imagines, uses their thinking process on and on and on, a certain structure, a certain belief. And you see how these same patterns that you see internally through the mind also start manifesting in a certain way in the external world. And you start seeing like very clear patterns after a while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's basically how it works. And you could kind of think of it as from the standpoint of the human realm, a thousand's the absolute truth. Like it's the absolute, as Hegel, the philosopher, used to call it, is the absolute. Like there is a truth it's not dependent upon your perception if it's true or not. Your perception just can be on a spectrum of how much truth you understand and what degree of it. But it's kind of like the Russian dolls almost. Um, because technically consciousness is infinite, God's infinite, but the human can experience 1,000. So within 1,000, if you want to make it like a visual, like imagine like a big circle, and everything it goes on infinite outside the circle, but within the circle that's 1,000, which call it this realm. And then the next level or whatever, we'll say just for simplicity's sake, 800 would be inside 1,000, and it would go on and on Russian doll style until you got to the point which would just be 200, which would just be totally neutral. It exists. It is. It has reality and creation outside the human ego. Um, and anything that's below 200 doesn't even exist in that circle. It's just like technically aligned with lower astral domains or the human ego um, force energies that need to be constantly energized to have existence because anything above 200 doesn't need to be energized. It just is.
Right.
And like to me, it was when I figured it out when they say to um, like Christ has, because for instance, very few things I've ever calibrated 1,000 that had a physical representation, but the avatar is like the Buddha, Christ, Krishna, and it
Mm-hmm.
always said like Christ had the whole wide world in his hands. It's quite literal because that consciousness to which he symbolically incarnated as a human body is why they call it an avatar is God, so to speak, at the highest level that can be experienced in this realm, and that
Mm-hmm.
energy carries all the other energies within it. So, and the physical world is simply 200, like the human body, like matter without any kind of projection onto it is just straight up 200. Like it's like the just is like, and it all is coming out of and manifesting out of this absolute of a thousand, or technically it goes on for infinite, but the human cannot experience it outside the thousand realms.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, my point being is he's got the whole wide world in his hands is quite literal. Like everything exists within Christ consciousness, like
Mm-hmm.
or what they call it in the East, Buddha nature, or Buddha mind, or whatever, Krishna consciousness. They have different terminologies and different cultures, but it's basically God as close as what a human can experience it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and everything exists within this absolute energy field, which is the source of all of our existence, my existence, Spoon's existence. That's the very source of us. That's why they say like heaven's within you and Christ is within you, because it's true. All this, everything else is just structure built upon that, and it goes on pretty. It is a very fascinating study, and you do after doing it for a while, you do see clear patterns, and you also see things that were going on inside yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can be utilized in many ways. It's very easy technique to test it out yourself. I mean, it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy because the one requirement to make it work is you got to get your whole ego out of it. Like, and
Right.
that's easier
Yes,
said than done at first.
absolutely.
Because if you hold something from an energy below 200, i.e., the ego perception, strictly, you just prove yourself right with a muscle test. But in the presence of God detached, and you just ask without feeling one way or the other about an answer, you get an objective result that can be repeated by multiple people, by yourself, done totally blind, because how I started doing it, because I've failed many times in the past trying to do it because I had all these ego attachments to certain things.
Attachments. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
I
I,
started, yeah, again,
I was just gonna say maybe did you find that you had to have certain questions in the beginning to kind of hone your skills on this? Things that you weren't attached to, because that's the hard part that I find with using a lot of different tools, that you have to have the ego out of it. A lot of the questions you want answers to, you can't actually ask in the beginning
yeah,
because
um, is very hard to do that. At least it was in this case. Um, I experimented many years ago with it, and I was getting all kinds of weird results all over the place. And I had all kinds of weird beliefs that were messing with the results. But I noticed even back then there was something to it because things I didn't care about, I would get accurate results to. Like
right.
like the Croton wandering, the toads coming down the hill. I remember that one. Like the
Mm-hmm.
toads are coming down the hill right now. And I got a strong response, and I didn't care about that. It was just kind of a funny thing I was doing back and forth with Sandra. And then it turns out, yes, finally the toads were coming down the hill to go to the river to lay their eggs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of little things like that to where I saw there was something to it, but I was still like all over the place with my results because I was still very attached to a lot of things. I had a lot of ego positionalities, and I didn't really mess with it after a while, for a long time into like the last months. And I came up with an idea. I'm going to test this out. I'm going to do it blind because according to Hawkins, you could do it blind. You could even hold something in mind and with a partner and test it. You don't even have to tell them what it is. You can even do this with a child, like it has no stake in the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And how the only way I could figure, because I still was getting results all over the place, is that I would do it blind and I would use flashcards. And what I would do is, it's the same thing on both sides,
Hmm.
but I have no idea what's on this card because I'll take, like, in this case, this is to see if I'm in a good position, uh kinesiology speaking, to even do a calibration. Because if
Hmm.
you're really tired or you're going through something emotionally, it's like your meridian systems are all kinds of screwed up and you're not going to get a good result. Like, you have to be coming from a good place. So the first thing I figured I'd start doing an experiment with is I have three cards here just to establish if I'm in the baseline to even do a correct kinesiological response. And I wrote on the cards Lord Krishna, Lord Jesus Christ, Charles Manson. And these three cards, I shuffle them up
Hmm.
and I'll take the card, I'll put it on my lap or whatever, and I'll say this card has a positive energy, totally detached from what I will get a result from. And lo and behold, if I'm in a good state, um, I could do this 5 times in a row and pick the Charles Manson card every time because that would be the one that made me go weak. So after doing that a few times, I'm like, all right, I'm in a good state, um, where I can do a correct kinesiological response. Then I have this
Hmm.
big stack of cards. At this point, I God knows how many are in there. And I shuffle them up and I just pull one off the top and do the same thing. And like, this card, what's written on this card has a positive energy. Yes, no. And then from there, I might use David R. Hawkins scale of consciousness on a logarithmic scale, 1 to 1,000, where 200 denotes truth. This calibrates at 500. Okay, I went weak. At 400. Okay, I went weak. At 300. Oh, I'm strong. At 350, strong. At 360, strong. At 370, weak again. At
Okay.
365, strong. Okay, it's 365. Um, and I started doing this over the months and making sure at least a few times I calibrated and I got Charles Manson card each time. And I'm like, all right, I got the Charles Manson card a few times in a row. I think I should be good today. Then
Yeah.
I did the calibrations with the blind on the cards. And lo and behold, when you get to the same card, when it comes back to the top of the deck, I got the same answer as last time. Didn't know what the card was. It's in a mix of, at this point, of God knows how many cards. And also started asking people who do this around the world. And lo and behold, a lot of them got the same results, at the very least off like 5 or 10 points, which is, but
Hmm.
always above 200. Like, if we both went positive, like it's over 200, it's always been the case.
Yeah.
We just, in the scale of consciousness, we might get like a 5 or 10 differentiation, but sometimes not even that. And then
Hmm.
it's like, all right, after doing this for so many months, there must be something to this. Obviously, I'm not trying to fool myself. There is something to this. Understanding how consciousness works, and if you claim that all is consciousness, that all is God, you are getting an answer from consciousness or quote unquote God at the same, because you're just asking in the presence of it, not caring if it goes either way. And if you're able to ask something and not, you can feel internally, in my opinion, at least I can, like when you want an answer to be a certain way, like,
Yeah.
but a good way to get rid of that is to start practicing with cards and also learning how kinesiology works with the meridian systems and the body. Because there's a lot of people who use kinesiology not for true and false or the scale of consciousness, that they like doctors and stuff like that. Like,
Hmm.
I've seen some pretty cool videos where like a lot of doctors like demonstrated with kinesiology, people have messed up arches or flat feet or something like that, that they always go weak, just standing by themselves. But you put them on their, what are those, orthopedics?
Orthopedics.
Yeah, you put them on the right one to adjust them correctly, and they'll go strong.
Hmm.
If you put them on the wrong one, or say, put the wrong one under somebody's feet, they'll also go weak. So there's
Hmm.
like something to, the meridians, internally, the energy flow that has to do with kinesiology for it to work. And you also have to be in a pretty good space, like I say. there are days like I don't get the Charles Manson card. And then I'm like, but I kind of already knew that because I was feeling kind of weird or tired or whatever. So I'm like, all right, this is not for today. Like,
Hmm.
and or this for another time. And then when I do get it consistently, like a few times in a row, I'm like, all right, time to do the actual flashcards. Like, and I found, like I said, you get repeatable results. You could do it, have other people get the same results that don't know you or don't have the same context that necessarily you're trying to ask the question out of, which is not a question. You're making a statement, by the way, because if you ask a question, you are calibrating the energy of the question. So you're making a statement, basically in the presence of consciousness of God, whatever you want to call it, and seeing if there's a reality or no reality, because anything below 200 has no reality. Therefore, the in the presence of the self of consciousness, it has no existence. So therefore, you go weak.
Hmm.
And if there is an existence, you go strong. And then you can arbitrarily grab one of these scales of consciousnesses. I just use David R. Hawkins. This is why I reinvent the wheel is my attitude. 1 to 1,000, like they did a lot of experimentation to even come up to see that if you're going to use whole numbers, 1 to 1,000, logarithm seems to be the way to go.
Hmm.
And I just do that. And then I noticed over the months, there's a lot of times I got answers where I wasn't sure what to do with that answer at the time. Um, but I was like, all right, let me let any attachment I might have to this, any desire for it to be either way, go and see what happens. And I noticed as time progressed, when I stopped aligning with energies under 200, that things have been clearing up in my life and internally, and I feel more in touch with my, call it, the true self of God, of divinity, whatever you want to call it. And
Hmm.
at this point, experimenting with kinesiology and seeing that if I don't align with things under 200, life gets better. When I do align with it, it gets worse. It's just, it's, yes, subjective. I mean, kinesiology, you can make it objective. That's the whole point of it. But um,
Hmm.
the only thing is it's very subjective and experiential, and it takes like you can hear me talk about it and it might be interesting to you, or you can deny it. It's there's certain answers I've gotten where I really don't know what to make of it at the time. Like I truly
Yeah.
don't know. And you can get different results. Like Hawkins used the example that he's gotten different results for like elephants, for example. And then he realized, okay, what if I'm holding it? Because usually he holds it in mind. He's like, if I hold an African elephant versus an Asian elephant, or a
Oh.
domestic, I'm picturing this domestic elephant compared to this one in the wild, or this one from a TV program that was in a nature film or whatever. How am I holding it is going to tell me a different energy response.
Hmm.
So with the flashcard, I learned to be very specific and precise to get the exact context I meant the statement to be.
Yeah.
And I also told people like, okay, make sure this is the context of the statement when you make it. When I was checking with other people, and lo and behold, you get the same results, and it's been very fruitful. And there's a lot of ways you can utilize this towards your own growth. But for it to work, you have to get be able to let go of what you think you know, and be open, because a lot of people will say, "Oh, God, give me the truth," and then God tells you the truth, and you're like, "That's not the truth." Yeah, of course. You want the truth on your terms, so you want your perception to be true,
Yeah.
not the truth. So, and I've done that
Yeah.
before. I get it. And the one thing
Yeah.
about
We've all.
kinesiology is, yeah, I just finished this one thought, but the one thing about kinesiology is it's you would experience this stuff at a certain level of consciousness anyway. You would get clarity and it'd be obvious to you, but doing it this way, you're getting answers sometimes that you're not ready for. And that's the deal. You might not be ready for your answer yet, but
Yeah. I can get that too. Sorry, I got just a little bit distracted at the end. There's this guy, and he has four weenie dogs on the leashes. He's got all four of them, and it's just anyway. You can just imagine the whole scene. I was seeing there for just a second.
Uh-oh.
But yeah, no, I get what you're saying about like having to constantly retest and make sure you're in the right energy where you can let the ego go, because there's some days you think, oh, today I'm pretty good. I feel like I could look at this stuff and be detached from it. Um, and then you find when you do your test questions, no, not the case. I have that in some of my practices as well, um, where I have to sort of like try to ground and center. And if it's if it's something that I'm doing on behalf of somebody else, I have no problem being detached from that for the most part with things I'm using. But when I'm looking at stuff for myself, I find the ego often gets in the way of using some of those tools. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
one of the things you can do to kind of get your ego out of the way when you first experiment with it is
Mm-hmm.
get yourself a partner. Sometimes I use a partner, but most of the time I'm self-testing. I found that I used the pincer method. There's many methods. You got to figure out what works for you. But the pincer method was you keep your thumbs, don't move your thumbs at all, and then you push down on the finger with the in my case the left finger with the right finger, and you go weak um, if it's below 200 and strong if it's above. Or you
Mm-hmm.
could just make the statement, this has a negative energy, and then you see if it's positive. This has a positive energy, and you go weak. Like,
Yeah.
um, you can, the simplest way, the way Hawkins taught was with a partner, and you just use the deltoid muscle test, which is one of the most common kinesiological tests, but you need a partner to do that. Um, but one thing, you can get yourself a partner and you get a bunch of your books, your quote unquote spiritual books, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
put them in a book cover. Like just make or like we did in school, just make the paper bag book cover. If you're in a pinch, take like 10
Mm-hmm.
books, put them in the book cover, find a kid, find a child, not a child that's misbehaved, but like a just a normal kid, like a
Mm-hmm.
little kid, and have them hold it to their solar plexus and do a deltoid test and see what books make you go strong and what make you go weak. Forget about the scale of consciousness thing. Like, um,
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting for research purposes. And I do find it interesting. But even Hawkins himself, I saw in like a lecture I listened to some months back, was saying he kind of wishes that he didn't teach people necessarily the scale of consciousness, that he just taught them yes, no. Because with the scale of consciousness, immediately a lot of people, most people, myself included for a time being, see the scale of consciousness as a ranking system, which it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's denoting how much energy is in this particular field, attractor field. That's all it's denoting. Um,
Yeah.
it's not a ranking system. Like it's like certain things, like for instance, like I said, the human body is like 200 or technically like 205, I believe. Um, and like you could say like, oh, working out is like, it depends on what kind of workout you're talking about. It could be anywhere from the 200s to 300s. So this
Mm-hmm.
is, but it's just the level of energy it's manifesting out of. Like, it doesn't mean it's better or worse than the energy of 600. It's just different. And technically, when we're dealing with energies of like 600 and above, 600 also on that scale denotes when enlightenment begins to take place, where the ego is transcended and you start waking up to the true self, the dreamer. Like, but that's an energy that's a totally radical experiential energy compared to like like 200, 300, where you're like working out, but doesn't mean working out's bad. Like, I don't know how I'm trying to put it, but it's not a
Yeah.
ranking system. It's denoting a different level of the field of consciousness, which is not a better or worse thing, by the way. It's just denoting energy, like simply put, like, but people start seeing it immediately like, oh, I gotta get this next point because it ranks me higher or something like that. Like, and there's
Yeah.
something ingrained in the human consciousness that sees numbers as like, if it's a higher number, it's better, or it's like
Uh-huh.
same kind of psychological trick why they will say like 19.99 instead of $20 because it's like, oh, that I think I'm getting a deal because it's 1 cent cheaper, but it's like it's actually cheaper than $20. Like it's
Yeah.
there's something ingrained with us you start to see as well as time progresses, is that we say we don't rank things, but we do. And immediately,
Yeah.
when I see people who are, or you introduce this to them, they immediately, you could tell by their context, they're trying to use it as a ranking system, or they're
Mm-hmm.
totally turned off and they're like, this is a ranking system. And it's like, no, either or, you're projecting that onto it. It's not because it's subconsciously you hold things in rank, because you find it if you hold some, if you think even if you're, in my opinion, it's like when you suppress that, you immediately notice and say it's a ranking system, but it's not. It's your projection onto it, and then like and the other people are kind of like more consciously saying that, but it's um
My earbuds died.
uh
I don't know if can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay. It switched over to my car.
uh,
Sorry about that. I lost like a couple of seconds there. Um, but
I can
yeah, no.
loud and clear though.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Were you finished with what you were saying? I'm sorry. I hated to interrupt, but I lost that for just a second.
Well, I'm just saying there's two things that I've noticed that will kind of hold you back. First off, thinking it's a ranking system, which immediately means you're coming out of an energy of under 200 because that's your own perception of it. It's not coming out of a what is. It's just how you're projecting onto it. Um,
Hmm.
because immediately you tell people don't try to calibrate yourself because you can't accurately calibrate yourself, because there's no way you would ask that question unless it was manifesting out of an energy below 200. And immediately, what do they do to try to calibrate themselves? So because they see it as a ranking system. And then
Yeah.
the other thing is people start doing mental gymnastics to justify their belief systems, or saying, oh, well,
Hmm.
actually, this is not false. It just means this is this and this. It's like, no, black and white, it means it's false. Sorry. Like, it's just, um, but,
Yeah, it's hard for people. Like I thought that was kind of interesting. We talked several weeks ago, and I kind of threw up one of the systems, um, human design, and after the episode, you kind of went. I don't know if you actually tested it or if you just looked at
no,
what had been tested.
I looked at what been tested. I never tested that.
Yeah. And then I can't remember what you told me, but it calibrated over 200, both the method and the guy that channeled it. So that was interesting to me. I don't know. I'd like to think, I don't know. I guess like with the whole calibration system, when you first started talking about it a lot, I was looking at it more as a ranking system. And so it was very difficult for me to kind of decide, well, how do I even want to try to use this information? Like it's useful and I get it. And to me, it's kind of like food nutrition labels. Like there's good information on there, and I could see how it could be utilized, maybe if I'm doing a certain thing. But for the most part, I'm a little clueless how to apply it. And so for me, I don't know. It's just I've not been particularly drawn to it, but I'm not repelled by it either.
Yeah,
So
like I said, I think it's more of a like I don't think he necessarily, like I was saying earlier, I don't think I completed that thought because I wandered. But Hawkins was saying that he kind of wishes he didn't show people the scale of consciousness necessarily. Um, but if he just showed them what is true, or what's life supporting, and what is will make you go strong, and what doesn't, what's a lie, what's falsehood, what's an energy that's destructive to life, would make you go
Mm-hmm.
weak, that'd be more beneficial to most people. It's just interesting for quote unquote consciousness research because to apply the scale of consciousness, but a simple yes or no would be all one would need technically. Like, don't align with what makes you go weak. That's it. You don't need to know
Yeah.
necessarily the level or the number or whatever. But to me, just the way I'm wired, I guess I find it interesting. Like, because I always like looking at patterns and deducing
Mm-hmm.
things from seeing patterns and stuff like that. In that sense, it's really cool. But like, okay, a book makes you go strong. Okay, it's life supporting.
Mm-hmm.
It's true on some level on the spectrum. It's true on some level. Like, and if it makes you go weak, it's not true, and it's going to hurt you if you align with it, basically. Um,
Yeah.
and like I said, you can just get books, put them in, like, that's a simple experiment that you can do to get your ego out of it. Just find a kid as, and hold this book that's in a book cover to their solar plexus. Um, don't look at them in the eye, to suggest something, look away, like, and do it blind like a scientist would, and
Mm-hmm.
push down. And first calibrate the kid, or make sure the kid's not like misbehaved or something like that, because kids calibrate under 202, as we discussed last episode. But
Yeah.
find it like a normal kid and say, okay, hold this to your solar plexus, and or to give them a baseline first, like, oh, hold somebody that you love in mind, hold somebody that you're afraid of in mind, because they should go weak when they hold somebody that's afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Go strong when they hold somebody they love, and then say, oh, hold this book to your solar plexus and test them. It's a very interesting experiment that anybody could do.
Yeah.
Um, and the scale of consciousness thing, you kind of have to, like I said in the beginning, if you're not that familiar with it, consciously, you'd say on a logarithmic scale from 1 to 1,200, denoting where truth starts, this calibrates at this number, blah blah. But until you kind of got that, like, in consciousness, like, where it's you, okay, of course that's what it means, like, you might have to say it like that. Was that he recommends that in all his books when he teaches people how to do it. It's like, okay, you kind of have to know what the scale consciousness even is, and before you start just doing it, like, but it make like the full statement on the scale 1 to 1,000. But technically, you can make up your own scale. You could say A to Z, where
Yeah.
at Y, or I don't know, or a W denotes the beginning of truth, and blah blah blah. Like, it's like, it's just, like I said, I don't reinvent the wheel. It's just 1 to 1,000 works for me. You can see clear patterns with that spectrum of number, like, um, but a simple yes or no would suffice. You don't have to go into consciousness research, like, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're
I
interested
can.
in learning more about it, any of Hawkins' books, I would start with Power versus Force. But any of the how kinesiology, how to do it yourself, are in the back of every one of his books. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and every one of his books, he kind of elaborates more upon the scale. But the basic premise that he got his PhD for is put forth in Power versus Force. So
Yeah. It's it's good stuff. I don't know. It's always interesting to see what kind of results, because I think for the most part there were some. I remember when you were sharing some of those calibrations that you had found. I don't think they were actually your calibrations, but um, some of the ones were a little surprising to me. But I don't think there were any that I was necessarily attached to. I don't think I've run across any that are just like making me question everything, you know. Like I think there was one that it kind of puzzled me a little bit. Uh Maybe is it Qigong?
Yeah,
Calibrated under 200, and I was like, I don't really understand why that is, but I don't know. I don't know that it matters. It's not a practice that I held, but it's one that interests me. Um,
well, that kind of also goes back to the elephant example I gave. You got to be
mm-hmm,
very specific with your context because basically you're measuring context. If you context is nonlinear, it's a knowingness of what something
mm-hmm,
means that gives meaning to whatever statement. Um, so an attractor field, a certain energy is a context. So you're measuring basically the essence of the context. And like I was saying with the elephant examples, how are you holding this elephant? If you're picturing something, what elephant are you picturing? Like, because it can
mm-hmm,
give you different results. So you have to be very specific with the context. And with
yeah,
Qigong, that was I found two different results. I think one of them was like in the 200s and one of them was like 190 or something like that. So it
right,
depends. And you could also test like the range. Like I've seen that done with astrology for or tarot, for example. The
yeah,
most consistent result that if you say tarot has a positive energy and we go weak, and you look on the scale of consciousness is 190. But further investigation, you see that okay, for the most part, what the world is using tarot for is divination, and divination always calibrates under 200. You cannot predict the future. The future doesn't exist. It always is coming out of the ego and the perception. Um,
mm-hmm,
and you see like there's actually a full range with tarot that goes all the way down to like close to 100 and all the way up to like 210. And then if you start calibrating decks in and of themselves, no tarot practitioner, just the deck, you usually
yeah,
get about 200. Um,
mm-hmm,
so flat out neutral, just like the human body or any physical matter or whatever. And you
mm-hmm,
see that there are contexts the tarot can be used as high as 210. Like, however, in the most general sense, the essence of tarot would be 190 because people are using it, for psychic readings, divination, that kind of thing. And
mm-hmm,
so you have to be very specific um, in your context because you're measuring the context. And Hawkins was even talking about that more in his later books and his later lectures. Okay, we found that you got to be very specific. You got to
mm-hmm.
coming from a certain context, like um, and also get your ego out of it because the ego will just confirm its own beliefs, like Aleister Crowley's 1000,
100%.
like shit like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah, I mean that's the interesting part with tarot. Like I don't use it often, but when I do, it's got to be one of those spots where I am able to not have the ego in it. And it's not I don't look at it as like I mean it is telling me something like a possibility of the future, but it's not in that sense, so to speak. It's more like I use it more on my healing journey, to be quite honest, like to see where I'm sort of going to be up and down in that particular aspect of it. It's because I think I had a reading not that long ago, and I kind of feel like if I hadn't done that, all of the stuff that I dove into in January and February that was so heavy and dark, I don't know that I could have seen the light at the end of the tunnel without that reading.
yeah,
So it was definitely a useful tool for me in January. So yeah, but it is one of those like for sure you have to have the ego out of it. And that means if you have the ego out of it, you can't really ask these personal questions because that's
yes,
all ego.
it can. That's why never calibrate yourself. because there is
Yeah.
no context where that is coming out of an energy that is going to be beneficial. It's always
Right.
going to be math. That's another thing you discover with attractor fields is it's not cause and effect. Certain things manifest at a certain energies. So, for instance, that attractor field manifested you asking, "What do I calibrate it at?" And it's
Mhm.
never going to be positive. Like, it's always going to be egoic. And I would recommend also people around not testing people around you. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to know their personal consciousness. Like, what's your business? Like, you all you want to do is prove that they're high or they're low. Like, you just want to prove
Yeah.
yourself right. There's no good context to come out of it. There's been a couple cases where I did calibrate somebody I personally knew, and it was literally just because I didn't know what to think about this person. Like I didn't know how to
Mhm.
read them. Wanted to know objectively, not wanting to it to be either way. I needed to know because is this person like keeping around harming or not? Like,
Yeah.
but it's like 99% of the time, like it's there's no way like you're doing that for good intentions. You're trying to put them on a ranking system, like that they're
Mhm.
putting on a pedestal or putting them in a pit, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, so, but you know, certain things that if you're truly interested in what the truth is, it's a good tool. Like, um,
Yeah.
and you don't even, like I said, don't even need the scale of consciousness. Like, don't even use the scale of consciousness. Strong, weak, like strong, weak.
Mhm.
That's all you need to know. Like, um, a
Yeah.
lot of cultures I heard, like, I think they said like South Korea, it's a pretty common thing. Like, they'll go to a supermarket and like hold a mango to their solar plexus. Strong, weak. You go strong, the
Mhm.
mango goes in the basket. If you're weak, you throw it back to the store. Um,
There you go.
yeah, it's or you could do that with
I've heard of
supplements. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of certain people doing that. But I've never I'm not patient enough for all of that. It takes me forever to do shopping kind of anyway, so which it really doesn't. I don't want to, that's not my element. I want to be in and out, and it'd probably be better if I took a little more time, read some labels, did some testing. I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah, the thing is as well, when you align with like an energy, like I won't give the examples necessarily, but there's like one in particular I kind of struggle with when I got the answer. But it's
Hmm.
very consistently gotten out there and I got the same result and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, um, it conflicted with something I always believed. Like, and I kind of I, I I didn't think I even cared about this particular issue that much, and then I realized, oh shit, maybe I do. Like, and as I let go of that energy, it took a while to go, and eventually, when I realized it was gone, looked at the result, the objective result, from that energy field, which would have been in the 400s, and all of a
Hmm.
sudden, I started seeing things I never saw before, like
Hmm.
certain things my perception deliberately was filtering out for a long time, and then I saw there was overwhelming evidence from a logical rational perspective that actually backed it up more than, and everything that was backing up the old opinion was just opinions of other people's opinions of other people's opinions. Like, and
Hmm.
then I realized, oh wait a minute, there's actually a lot of evidence for this, and it's very actually high 400, like, well, not high 400 but like mid 400, like science based. And
Yeah.
I'm like, actually, there's a lot of evidence. Why did I never see that before? Like, um, so it's like, but like I said, you're measuring context. You're measuring, as Hawkins put it, essence. Like there's
Yeah.
essence and perception. Like everything has an essence. Like this lighter has an essence. Like this book has an essence. This microphone has an essence. I have an essence. Spoons has an essence. You could call that essence spirit. From another vantage point, you could say it's context. Like,
Hmm.
Because, like I said, context is non-linear. It's just knowingness that is interpreting any particular statement within that context. Um, that's why you got to be careful with being so literal with words sometimes. Like people get very lasered in on words. Words are just mouth noises, they're symbols, but it's the context that those symbols and mouth noises are in that are giving them meaning. Like, um, and everything
Yeah.
in existence operates the same. Like they said, in the beginning was the word, and the word was God, and blah blah blah. Like it's just a structural representation of something nonlinear, of essence, something you can't grab with your hands. It's not objective, it's subjective. And the objective world exists within this subjective. And this is subjective that gives the object meaning. Like you have to understand there's content and context. like, um,
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting when you're able to let go of something like that you didn't realize you were attached to necessarily, and see how it starts changing all those things around you. Um, I had that one that happened last summer and there was nothing. I look at it more as like stories that I've held on to. And one of the ones last summer that I had to kind of look at differently was about being single. And there's nothing wrong with the story of being single. And there's actually nothing wrong with what I was holding onto about it in theory. But when somebody kind of challenged me on it, and I had to kind of look at that perspective and let it go, it started shifting all sorts of other things. And it's like, why is that? Why is that an important story to hold on to? Is it actually even valuable? No. It's just something that is, and it's fine. But for whatever reason, at some point, I felt like I needed a story that went with it, and it just sort of damaged all these other things in ways that I didn't understand until I let it go.
yeah, exactly. It's always like that.
Um, yeah,
It's the work is truly is to know thyself, not have other people tell you what you are, but discover it in yourself through
mm,
realization, through revelation is the only way that you discover um truth, and especially when it comes to spiritual truth is it's revelation, like because you won't be able to understand it even if somebody told you, like until you have that
yeah,
revelation, like um
yeah, yeah. There's it's interesting because it is sometimes it is stuff that other people tell you, but I I find the ones that are the most jarring are the ones that I told myself, like the stories that you make up and you think they're a good thing to hold value or hold on to, or I don't know. There's even like some value things that I had a couple of years ago, and I'm like, what is that even about? When
yeah,
you start digging into that stuff, and it's like, why is that important?
yeah.
It's not.
I've had so many of those two spoons. Too many to even count or
It's
recollect at the moment.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It's yeah. I mean, there's I don't know how many of those kind of things that I've let go over the years, and there's probably a million more in there waiting. So, but we can only do so much at a time, and you know, I don't know. Maybe we get there, maybe we don't. I do. I mean, sometimes at the time it feels horrible to make those discoveries, but when you're actually able to let them go, it eventually does feel lighter. It does feel better.
I've
It's
never
less,
regretted it,
yeah, it's less
never regretted
crap. Mm,
it. you always feel better when you finally do reach the other side, and sometimes you don't even realize it. Like that David Lynch thing I was talking about earlier, I've experienced that a couple times myself, where it's like you're so worried about what you're dealing with at that moment that's arising that you didn't realize how much you improved from a month ago until you were like, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute, like I haven't
Yeah.
experienced this in so long, like my context for this and this has changed, like
Hmm.
on and on and on, and I've never regret letting anything go. If anything, I discovered more about who I truly am, what God truly is.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't seem to end. Maybe, using the scale of consciousness, it goes to 1,000, whatever, from the human perspective. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like it doesn't seem to end. Technically, God's infinite. That's another thing. It connects. God is infinite. The Father, Brahman, the Holy Spirit, infinite, doesn't have a number. Like it can't be. It goes on forever, which is
Yeah.
just a concept to people, but it's just never stops. Like, um, but I've never regretted it. I've never regret not aligning with an energy of 200 yet. Like disassociating or letting go of any attachment to it. I've not had one example. At first, you kind of worried, like that example I gave earlier. I thought, oh, people are going to think I'm an idiot because I surround myself with people that think that way I used to think, and
Hmm.
immediately they thought I was an idiot, and so I was like, all right, that's on them. But I feel better and to know the truth about it, and I feel like I'm in a better spot in my life knowing it like this in this context. Um, it's almost like I said, a revelation. Like it was almost like a gift from God that I started realizing stuff that I wouldn't allow myself to realize before. And it's
Hmm.
if I was afraid, oh, they're gonna think I'm an idiot. So what if they think I'm an idiot? Like I don't care. like I feel better. You seem to be doing worse in a lot of cases. So I'm not comparing, but it's just like, why should I care? Like,
Yeah.
and it's not my place. Okay, maybe you have to discover this in your own way, and maybe you never will, but that's not my problem. Like, and it is a little scary
Yeah.
to let certain things go or to change your mind or see it from a different context because you surrounded yourself in community and with people around people and stuff like that thought the way you did before, and then you feel like you changed. It's like you realize sometimes they don't change, and like it's not your position to change them, and there is a overall plan. And I sure had to beat my head against the wall a lot of times before I was able to let certain things go. So it just is what it is.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I don't know. I think I think like having a particular mindset on a lot of things, like a lot of particular issues. I've always stayed so middle ground on a lot of things. And, because there's a lot of those things that I just don't, I guess I don't feel strongly one way or the other. And I can kind of see both sides or whatever. And so I don't care where people are at on that. And I don't know if that's like from more of the mediator mindset, because that's where I tend to be playing the middle all of the time. Um, but I've noticed like now that I'm starting to voice things more and have like maybe a little, it looks like I'm leaning more one side than the other. And that's not necessarily the case, but to kind of explore a topic or something, maybe I'll play devil's advocate a little bit, or maybe I'll, challenge something a little bit. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm anti this or I'm for that. I'm
Yeah.
just like exploring. And so for me, it's not any different, but because I'm verbalizing it more or in a different way, I don't know. I see things around me shifting a little bit with that, and that's a little unnerving. But I don't think it's actually a bad thing. It it reveals a lot of different things, I suppose. So to me, like sometimes I go back and I watch some of our conversations, and some of the things that I noticed, especially in the early ones, is I don't pick up on all of the conversations. Like I'll go back and listen and I'll be like, oh, that wasn't the point that you were actually talking about at all. My brain went over here in this other thing, and I don't know. It makes me wonder how often in real life, like I think I'm in that conversation and I think I'm understanding the person, and I'm not actually doing that.
Yeah, that's the problem I've had my whole life, which actually MBTI actually helped me kind of unveil was the INTJ thing of using intuition to such detriment to the sensing is that I would jump to conclusions very quickly. I'd just see one pattern based on my and then assume something. And then it
Mhm.
turned out as the thing unfolded, I made myself look like an idiot. Like, um, it's yeah, that's like in Jungian terms is like having more of an imbalance with the intuition. That's why intuition is very misunderstood, but that's a conversation for another day. But uh, but yeah, abstracting
Yeah,
a
we
pattern.
should have that conversation one day. We talk about intuition, but yeah, a different day because that's a big topic.
Oh yeah, that's a huge topic. And I confused everybody today with talking about the scale of consciousness. Wait until I get into cognitive functions and MPTI. So, but yeah, I'm noticing the time spoons, and maybe we should start wrapping it up because I gotta cook dinner
Yeah.
soon.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm good with that. I feel like we've probably landed it at a reasonable spot.
Yeah, we
So,
definitely got an hour more, way more than an hour. All right.
yeah, I think we're probably 2 hours at this point.
Yeah, we're close anyway. All right, guys. So thank you for tuning in to this day's episode with Spoons and Joe, Where the Mind Wanders. You can catch us at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, where we premiere every week. And we also have a Telegram channel that we'll also link in the description. I believe Spoon's linked in the last episode, which also brings us to, if you go to our channel, we actually from last week posted David R. Hawkins calibrations of various things. There's some hundreds of calibrations on these two lists in PDF format. So if you're interested in checking out that, you can do that. Or just subscribe to our Telegram channel anyway. Like Telegram's a good platform if you like to listen to things audio because you can lock your screen, walk around, listen to podcasts or whatever. So yes, you can check us out there. We should be up on multiple platforms shortly enough. And until next time.
Yeah.